Surface level diversity is that which you see. So color of skin, sex, height, attractiveness. We've got diversity.
Yeah,
okay, come here.
Yeah, all right. He's short.
Wait a minute, you're standing on your tiptoes. Okay, can you tell us apart?
Yes.
Okay. Where'd you go to school?
University of New Orleans.
I went to University of Notre Dame.
Well,
Where'd you get your PhD?
University of Houston.
I got mine at Tulane.
So back to New Orleans.
Where were you born?
California, Newport Beach.
Painesville, Ohio. Diversity is that which we use to tell somebody else is different than we are. Okay? We use those things. We have some theories. Okay, we've got theories. Similarity attraction. Okay, Byrne came up with this back in the 70s, and it is you're attracted to people that look like you. Okay, and we think about that. What do we think about? We think about people that are the same color, maybe the same sex, or the same weight, same height, whatever it might be. And we impute that they are like us based on their values, attitudes, and beliefs. So we look at people and we say, hey, they look like me. They must think like me. And then what happens? They open their mouth. Okay, surface level gives way to these deep level types of diversity. Deep level diversity is about values, attitudes, and beliefs. And if you could argue that that is really who you are. From an organizational perspective, which is the way that we look at the world, because it's easy to look at diversity within the context of an organization, right? Is what can you do for me? Okay, can you perform? Can you do your job? I don't care what you look like if you can make me look good. Okay? And when I say it's easy because when you go into an organization, I have control over you. If you are a racist, sexist, homophobe, and you act that way towards your fellow employee, I can vote you off the island. I can't do that out in society at large. We have what's called the First Amendment.
The environment that we work in now isn't the same environment that our parents worked in, which wasn't the same environment that their parents worked in. Our economy as a whole has changed. We've gone from an agricultural to a manufacturing to a service-based economy. But we've also gone to a demographically different economy. So if we get back to surface level characteristics and we look at demographics that we can see that the workplace is not just white males. And in fact, I think the last data we had from the census said that in the last 10 years, 70% of entrants into the workforce were not white males. So they were female or minorities, as we categorize minorities in our society. Which does also suggest that in the future, this trend is continuing. And so the workplace that our kids go into is not going to be the same workplace that we are in.
I thought about New Orleans, where I got my PhD. Now, New Orleans was a very interesting city for me because I had never really lived in a diverse city. Okay, I grew up in Indiana. I moved and lived in Greensboro, North Carolina. And then I moved to New Orleans, which was an entirely different world. And what they call New Orleans, amongst all the other things that they call New Orleans, some good, some bad, they call it the checkerboard, because of the way they live. Now, New Orleanians would say that they have good race relations. And the reason they have good race relations is because they try to ignore each other as much as possible. Okay? And that's what I saw here. Now, New Orleans grew up with very affluent people and very poor people. It just started off with a slave-based economy as well. And over time, the city grew. And you can see that we have all these different colors, and you can talk about those being people of different colors, if you will. And you can see that while they are integrated, they kind of stay together.
There is integration, but it is absolutely at the edge, at the margins. And we don't really find it so that there's no real mixture. And that was my experience in the workplace. There were the integration took place on the margins.
I came from the Midwest, and like I said, race had never been an issue for me because there was no race. So I moved to Greensboro, North Carolina, and I worked at the Guilford Center, and I was finally in a more of a diverse workplace, and I started hearing people making comments about African Americans and women that I had never heard before. And they expected me to laugh along with them. And sometimes I did. Because you're uncomfortable, you don't know how to react. But it did make me uncomfortable, and it got me to thinking, why is this happening? I mean, something as simple as an application form. We know that on an application form that women named Shamika are less likely to get a job than women named Susan. Is that a demonstration of overt discrimination and racism? It's perceived to be somewhat unconscious. So there's things that we can do, though, within the organization to ensure, to the extent possible, that we look at people more objectively. You can get rid of names, you can get rid of identifying factors on an application form.
Yeah, I was going to say, the average HR manager, when they look at a resume, they're looking for a reason to screen it out, and they do not look at it long. They look at the resume, or they pull it up on the screen, they look at it for 10 seconds, and it's gone. And so they're basing the information on what they see there. They're making that instant processing, that instant judgment.
We talk about diversity management like we can manage it. Okay, diversity management. Okay, we need 3 of these, 2 of those.
So that's like sexual harassment training. We already know how to do that.
Okay, well, yeah. Okay. So, but we don't manage diversity. Diversity exists in society. Diversity exists within the organization. But what the problem is right now is that we do have discriminatory policies and procedures within the organization. It has changed, but in 50 years, you know what's changed? Civil Rights Act of 1964, right? 50 years. Okay? What has changed is we have the right, we have the legal basis to stand up for our beliefs, to stand up for ourselves, to say you can't discriminate against it. But it's still an individual responsibility. Is you have that right. You have that right if you have a disability. You have that right if you're old in the workplace. We have to speak out and say, I was done wrong. She was done wrong. You were done wrong. You know, we talk about affirmative action. Came from Executive Order 11246, signed by Lyndon Baines Johnson. What's affirmative action? Everybody thinks it's quotas. We have to give unqualified minorities jobs in the workplace. It has nothing to do with quotas. In fact, quotas are illegal unless the company has been discriminating and they have a court order that says, you've got to do better. Okay, but Executive Order 11246 says that a company shall take affirmative action. Affirmative action, which means they got to do something, to ensure that people are not are fired based on race, sex, national origin, color, or religion.
Those colors and those little blocks, I guess color blocks, they are distinctive, they are individual, at the same time that they are grouped together. Now that tells me, and you mentioned integration, I've always felt that there's no such thing as integration because in terms of human beings, you know, because integration means that you become uniform, I guess, and you lose your individuality, your distinctiveness. So rather than talk about integrating, we should talk about respecting and accepting and honoring the distinctiveness, the individuality of each one that is a part of the group.
Right.
This is it. This is what you're saying over here.
Yeah.
Because if you look at it, she took those individual blocks, and what she did over here is now she mixed them up. but, and I know it's kind of hard for some of you to see, but there's still these individual pieces, and there's some clumps that are still the same, but they're spread out. So it's very interesting.